restless nights, coffee houses, clubs and neon lights. I rock the people my way, working my way, coming back to you. Working my way, coming back. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I see you in the morning light. New York, Boston, Philadelphia, LA, I still see your face. Buses roll, distance grows, but I remember you're just a dream away. Working my way, coming back to you. Working my way, coming back. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I'll see you in the morning light. Light on as I drive on, singing our song. Keep the light on as I drive on, singing our song. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I see you in the morning light. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I see you in the morning light. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between.
All right, good afternoon, folks. Welcome to What Are the Odds with Barnes and Baris. All right, first things first, before I even go on my rant, do not, if you did already, thanks and I appreciate it, do not give any super chats today. Do not give any super stickers. Do not give any super chats. Do not give Google, Alphabet, 30% of whatever you want to support me with to this company. A couple of changes before, again, Robert will join us in a second anyway, so let me just get this out of the way. A couple of changes. Will be on local soon. We're going to move you. We'll be on any platform we can be on for as long as we can be, but we're going to make alternates where you guys can join. I think on locals, we'll have something later where we can all interact and stuff and have uploads. But for the most part, you'll be able to see everything we're doing from there. And then also Rumble, perhaps we'll have what we're looking for. So we need a community where you can come and comment like this. Right now, we gather all of your comments from YouTube, from Periscope, from Facebook, and bring them in. And we have the online, the native People's Pundit Daily video, but you can't comment on it. You can comment in the comment section of the post. So it is what it is. So we're gonna have to make some changes. The best thing you could do, and we sent it out before, is give a follow on the newsletter for right now. And then we'll consolidate it, whether it's on PPD or if it's on locals, whatever it may be. We'll consolidate that so we're not binging you from, different services with different messages and filling up your inbox. All right. But again, Jack I appreciate it. But from guys, do not give. If you don't want to support them, all right, this new era of American authoritarianism that is being ushered in, which is what we're going to talk about today. If you don't want to support them, then we can't support them, right? So, for at least the most part, right? Yeah, I mean, that's right, John. They take 30% of what you give me here. Just remember that, 30%. You give me $30, they're taking 10. All right, roughly. All right. So 33, whatever. But there you have it. Listen, for the most part, you guys who follow me, I like to stick to numbers. I like to stick to data. And as many times as I get requests to give you, not throw in a saucy opinion here and there, but for as many times as I get asked to stray and veer off of data journalism or what it is that I do, I almost 99% of the time reject the chance to do that. And the reason why is because I'm the only one, many of whom still playing by the old rules, which is that if you enter into a space like I enter into, you need to remain at least give the perception of objectivity and impartiality so you can, maintain your credibility. But it never worked. It never worked because if you disagreed with big media, if you disagreed with big tech, if you had a different polling result, no matter how many times you were right and they were wrong, you still got lumped in. And if I defended Donald Trump based on principle, or if I had a polling result because I care about the quality of my work that didn't match their crappy results, their propaganda, then you got lumped in anyway. So it never really paid. It never really paid to play by the old set of rules. And so now no longer will I be doing that. That's the end, because at some point you have to put your principle first. And we're at that point. So I'm going to give my opinion for as long as I'm still allowed to before the Stasi ends up on my front door. Let's bring in Robert here and talk about this. Robert, what is a new era of American authoritarianism? We have never seen anything like this. I can't say, although to be, sometimes I don't like being right. I can't say this is terribly surprising at all. I think we all knew that this charade of liberty that was in it has been a charade for a long time. I call it hologram freedom or hologram liberty, because when you try to reach out and touch it, man, it's not really solid. You know what I mean? And then they come and then the charade fades away, and then here we are. And really, there you have it. They banned the president. They're going to come after everybody. This is more than just, look at what they're doing on Capitol Hill today, Robert. This is like, it's all connected. I mean, to really understand what's going on, you got to, and as a matter of fact, put the lower third there. Thank you. I mean, the bottom line is, this is an attempt to destroy him and his supporters. What they've always hated about this man, Robert, was never really so much his policy. It's like the system is built for him. They loved him before he ran for president. For the holidays, we all sitting around watching Home Alone 2. Remember the scene where Trump directs Macaulay Culkin? It's like, oh, down the hall to the left. I had to explain to my little kids how Trump used to be everywhere and beloved by everybody in this, in Washington and media. This is because the system is built for him. He screwed them over for people, right? And that really is the cardinal sin, my friend. That's it. And now he was not invited to the party. And now they're going to try to destroy him. They're going to try to teach everyone a lesson. Don't ever do this again. Don't you ever try to take power again. And by the way, we're going to crush dissent here. If you have a different point of view, you will not be allowed to speak it. I got to show you the messages that we have gotten already from social media companies, Robert. I'm not going to bow to this. You're not going to tell me what I am and am not allowed to say. You'll have to remove me, which is why I'm making plans to go elsewhere. It's that simple. I'll say what I want to say. I'm an American. I will say whatever the hell I want to say until you're willing to physically shut me up.
Well, personally, I pledge allegiance to the flag of Facebook, to the aura of Twitter, to the all the rest.
Father.
I also think the 2020 election was a beacon of election integrity and transparency. Have zero doubt about anything that took place or transpired in it. I'm like that character in the A Fish Called Wanda, being hung out the window. I totally and thoroughly apologize. John Cleese. John Cleese being hung out the window, and he's like, I completely apologize, totally, wholly, I retract that. I mean, it's rather, the scope and scale of it still surprised me. While I've been, and you've been telling people, and I've been telling people now for years to prepare that Alex Jones is the example, not the exception.
Trial run. That's it.
Absolutely, he was the template. Yep. They were going to try out on Jones everything they planned on trying out on everyone else. And because so many, man, how bad does Dan Bongino look? How bad does Rebecca Mercer look?
Ben Shapiro.
I mean, you knew this was coming for years, and you set up Parler to be ready to capitalize on it, and you use Amazon servers? I mean, come on. Yeah. I mean, this is mind-numbingly foolishness on them. Obviously, it's absurd what's happening to them, but how are they not prepared for it? I mean, I've been arguing with institutional conservatives, Sebastian Gorka, others, for years, that were very disdainful of Jones. You need to pay. The reason why they're targeting Jones is because they know you'll cooperate with his targeting, and then they'll use that fact of your cooperation against you.
Everything's about precedent, Robert. It's not just the law. It's not just in the law. It's about in culture and in society. Everything's about precedent.
And get away with it. Now, the upside was Jones learned how to get around him. So I've been telling people, look at what the InfoWars model is, because they found servers that can operate. They found email delivery mechanisms that can operate. They found web domain locations that can operate. I mean, I represented them. Well, tons of people, like people were saying, oh, maybe Parler can use Ocean Digital. Ocean Digital tried to shut down Jones right away. So, none of these people, if they're an institutional, MailChimp, been telling people for years, MailChimp is utterly unreliable. How did the Trump campaign use payment processors that could cut them off overnight and email? Right now, the Trump campaign cannot even email. Their people cannot even do anything with their servers related to any of it. While the Republican Party is, moved way past Trump fast. After they did the grift and the hustle of raising hundreds of millions of dollars in the name of protecting Trump's election, now Ronna McDaniel can't even get his name out of her mouth. But she is eager to defend poor Vice President Pence, who's been, I don't have strong feelings one way or the other about Pence, but the idea that it's going along with the institutional narrative. None of those people who raided the Capitol had any serious intentions of anything really bad, or bad things would have happened.
Robert, I was just going to say there are over 300 million guns in this country, Robert. Okay, if they're mostly, because we've polled this, we know, they're mostly in the hands of people of conservative opinions, all right, by the vast majority. And if they wanted this word insurrection, if they wanted to do something, Robert, then most of the people right now whining like a bunch of little babies, because you know what happened? They were made to feel vulnerable like they are. That's another thing. Their power is fake. It's not real. It comes from obedience. It's not power like the Roman Empire was real power. This is fake power. It comes solely from your obedience. And if they wanted to do something, most of the people are whining now, and the vulnerable little cowards that they are, they wouldn't even be around to talk about it. I mean, let's be real for a second here. Yeah. They did nothing to stop them because they could do nothing to stop them. And this crap, I mean, one more person tries to say this is about violence. Robert. Where were all of these people during the summer of love? They were it's like a dead cop every day. Could you imagine?
Exaggeration. We haven't seen an exaggeration of what took place since the Reichstag fire. So, I mean, in the degree to which they're exaggerating what happened, there's still no excuse for the idiots who went in. That's why we were telling people don't listen to Lynn Wood, don't listen to QAnon, and those people who were listening to that world that went in and caused all these problems and blowback on the president. I mean, the other problem is I've yet to hear an explanation from the left or the media as to how Trump could ever want this to happen. All it does is hurt him. There was no scenario. Trump really thought people were going to come in and hold Pelosi hostage, and suddenly he would become. Come on, that's preposterous. The degree of gaslighting and absurdity they're trying to shove down people's throats is nuts. Pretending this is the biggest insurrection in American history, that this is the equivalent of people, firing the cannons to start the Civil War, all of that nonsense. It was a small group of people who breached the Capitol security while the president was still speaking. They could not have been responding to the president because they did it while he was still talking.
Anybody who knows Washington, D.C. knows they didn't even have you ever been to the Capitol, you fools? I mean, and that's how you know the media is just intentional liars, complete propagandists. They know damn well that nothing the president said could have, those people could not have traveled that quickly, Robert.
No.
I mean, come on,
what
man.
the president said was they took certain things out of context.
Yeah.
But because they ignored what he said is let's have a peaceful, patriotic march where your voices are heard. He didn't say raid the Capitol. He didn't say storm the Capitol or anything like that. And the people who did do so were not there. Were not present at the speech. In fact, those people, they deliberately raided at a time in which those people could not dissuade them from doing so.
Right.
That's probably part of the timing of it. I mean, they timed it knowing that they were 45 minutes ahead of that crowd even showing up. And so they did it before the Congress could meaningfully debate anything. Which again, that undermined the president. Didn't help the president.
Yeah, it took the wind out of the sails.
Completely.
It doesn't make much sense because it took the wind out of the sails of the effort to object to the electors for Biden. It would make no sense to send a crowd in there before the process had a chance to play out. That's number one. Number two, look. And I guess this is a good time to bring up some of these fake polls. I know for a fact, legitimately half the country nearly wanted Republicans to object to Biden's electors. These polls that are coming out now are a joke. So
look at Rasmussen tracks daily.
Yeah, we're very close to
Rasmussen. Not ticking down during this time period.
They
so it's no surprise that it's Ipsos and Quinnipiac. And I was ragging Larry Sabato about that today, Mr. Crystal Ball.
Tiny crystal ball.
I was like, you're not going to seriously promote Quinnipiac's polls again, are you? Do you really think anybody outside of your world believes you? And I just reminded him, by the way, how did your predictions turn out, Larry? Because they were badly off all over the place. And he's yet to, he issued a mea culpa for his absurd predictions in 2016. He's yet to do so for his incorrect predictions in 2020.
And that's because Biden, they feel like they don't have to, Robert, because Biden's going to be the next president, right?
Even though they were badly off. Quinnipiac's a joke at this point. It's been a joke since 2016, frankly. Late 2016. None of the, but it's amazing, but it's going to be part of the narrative. And now you might get some senators and not too many House members. You notice that most House members that were going to object still objected even after everything that happened. Yeah. It was the senators who said, well, where can I hide under my bench? Look at these people that send people off to war so easily. Just overturned the president's veto to make sure that he could not bring people back from Afghanistan. And when they hear there's just a few plebes outside, the peasants have decided to come into the nation's capital. They're hiding under their desk, and they're hiding in the alleys, and they're hiding under their chairs and everything else. It shows what kind of people they are. Well, what a crock. And in truth, the real reason they're enraged is not because some people got into some fisticuffs with some Capitol security and knocked out some windows and doors. It's because they're the privileged elite that everybody's supposed to bow to, and they were shocked at the idea that there are plenty of Americans have no interest in bowing to them. What mortified them was not, like, if you look at the photos that are going viral that go to the visceral aspect of this, it's not the photos of people getting into arguments and fights with Capitol Police. It's Buffalo guy with the Viking hat using the speaker's gavel. It's that guy from Arkansas who decided to put his feet up on Nancy Pelosi's desk. And said, well, yeah, and decided to, just as a memento, took, an innocuous card that was to her. And they're like, and he was telling people afterwards he did it. And they're like, isn't that stealing? He's like, no, I left 25 cents. And it can't be. So it was populist mockery of the system that enraged them so much. And that's why they have to exaggerate. Part of the reason they have to exaggerate what took place. And especially the gaslighting that we haven't watched this for 9 straight months, that we didn't watch them take over the Senate chambers and senators' offices and threaten senators directly.
You remember Kavanaugh hearings? Do you remember the Kavanaugh hearings?
Yeah. It over and over again. I mean, do you recall the climate change? Remember the climate change sit-ins that AOC celebrated them for doing in Pelosi's offices? So remember when he took over the Wisconsin state legislature for months back in 2010? All of it celebrated. Bernie Sanders ran on the fact that he criminally, illegally occupied government buildings when he was a student at the University of Chicago. And over the civil rights museums, including the ones in D.C., they have lots of photos celebrating what? Occupying government property. So, I mean, it was one of the biggest things that was done by the anti-war movement in the late 1960s, early 1970s. Now, they end up taking a step further with Weather Underground, but we don't have any. I think they wanted a militia movement to exist, so that could be their pretext to completely crack down. It doesn't exist, so they're going to pretend that it does. They're going to pretend that a few people fooled by QAnon world into believing that they were helping the president by seizing the pedophiles when they raid the Capitol. Shows how dangerous those ideas were. I get a lot of crap because people, why are you attacking Q again? Because without Q, this doesn't happen. Without QAnon, this doesn't happen. That garbage that people were taking for a psyop, and if you still believe in them, you're a sucker and a sap. The Italian affidavit, that's just fake. Ignore that. But how do people still not realize at this point that not only was going after Dominion just a dumb idea? Ask Sidney Powell. She faces a $1.3 billion lawsuit currently on a bunch of claims she cannot defend, factually cannot. Lynn Wood is being investigated by the Secret Service for threats against the vice president. Now, I don't think he's crossed that line legally. But he did enough problems, that's for sure. You don't want to be on their radar, Robert. I mean, the woman who died, her main person she was following was Lynn Wood. So, and Lynn Wood put up something that's promoted storming the Capitol. Yeah. So if Trump would have had the people that saved it from getting worse were three things. 95% of Trump supporters had no interest in it, even when there was sort of a mob atmosphere that invited it. Second, of course, Trump had no interest in it and would have fought against it had he been properly advised prior to his speech, which clearly intel operators were not including critical information in the disclosure to that. And then third, because Alex Jones was there. And as soon as Alex Jones got down from the speech, was telling everybody to get out, get away from there. The petition was the permission to protest was on the other side of the Capitol. Don't be like BLM. Don't be like Antifa. And because he had his megaphone screaming at everybody to pull back, pull back, pull back, it could have got worse. But the fortunate thing, never give him credit for that. Never. Oh, the media? Of course not. No way. No, they were lying about him instead. They were pretending that he had something to do with it when he had nothing to do with it. He'd been preaching to his audience for months, for weeks leading up to this. Be careful. They may try to do a false flag staged event. So don't do anything dumb. People that had watched me and Viva a show of talking about QAnon and talking about Lynn Wood and the rest were there and knew not to go in because of the warnings that we had been given and the warnings we've been given on this show, not to watch certain people not pay attention to Lynn Wood in particular. Unfortunately, he had 1 million+ people that had become fans of Lynn Wood solely over this. And he was pushing obvious nonsense. The president's not in Texas secretly directing the military. How much dumb BS do people have to swallow before they realize, maybe I'm on for a bad psyop that is discrediting me and everything I care about? I've grown completely out of patience. I'm not going to go full Alex Jones. He was cussing and screaming at them a couple of days ago. Some big names that do it too. I don't want to hear you saying anything again. I don't want to hear your comments again. Look at what you just did. You just helped. There's no secret war against the pedophile rings inside. There's no sealed indictments. That's all garbage, 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 garbage. There's no Italy affidavit that's going to unravel the election. And folks, the data from the voting did not go overseas. It didn't happen. It's a lie. It was wrong from day one. Sidney Powell was wrong from day one. I and other people told her she was wrong from day one. Richard helped to tell them all the information that they had was wrong. They just ignored it. I don't like the political targeting of Dominion. Don't like Dominion. Don't like these vote companies in general because of the problems they can create. But she was off on. She did great damage to the president. So did General Flynn, frankly. Flynn pushing a lot of this. I was just going to say, if you look at the comments, and that's what I meant, but there are, some big names and going back 4 years, Robert, some very big names that pushed
the Qs and everything. So when somebody like, Agorka comes out and says, look, it's just BS, then that puts him at odds with others that Trump supporters sympathetic with, the Flynn's, right? Because Flynn pushed it too, plus Q quite a bit. So it is what it is. But
who was Lynn worse than people even following in the first place? But for him engrafting himself into the Sandman case, which he used a lot of questionable.
He's very good at doing that.
That case, by the way.
Yeah,
there were plenty of other lawyers. He didn't do anybody any favor. His problem was Sandman's family was going to hire me or someone like me who was willing to work either for free or cheap. I was working for free. Why pay, a big contingency fee to Lynn Wood, who, by the way, to my knowledge, has never won a defamation trial in his life in front of an actual jury. He had an open and shut case in Elon Musk. He lost. The judge thought he was such a disgrace of a lawyer. It criticized him throughout the case. And that was the beginning of his full mental breakdown when he decided to physically assault the lawyers actually working on the case in the elevator. The only thing I regret is not screaming about this more and not paying attention to the 8 coon boards. I didn't know that they were actually planning on storming the Capitol for weeks. What geniuses these guys are. They discuss it all in the message boards. Yeah, they're going to lead the next revolution. Come on. They're a combination of slow.
And I'll concede, Robert, there probably was an injected element in there because we have, the media is full of crap.
It was easy because they were telling everybody what they were going to do on the message boards. So if you wanted to infiltrate, instigate, there it was.
Which the Capitol Hill PD caught wind of. All right, just because the media never does their freaking job correctly. The Capitol Hill PD actually did get wind of this and said
the FBI had to know about it. They've been monitoring QAnon boards for 2 years. That means somebody in D.C. at the FBI misled Capitol Police.
That's right.
The FBI in New York's office, it reminded me of 9/11. Mm-hmm. Remember when there was a lot of local FBI offices warning of a problem, but the national FBI office was burying the problem?
Right hand didn't know what the left one was doing because they were ignoring each other. Yes. Yep. And that's what created the ALEC unit. Or ALEC unit.
The Looming Tower story. The whole people can watch the Netflix documentary. The unit that was supposed to be monitoring it did detail what was going to happen, and higher ups in politicized branches quashed it for politicized reasons.
Could you imagine if that was under a Trump administration? Could you imagine if that kind of blunder happened under a Donald Trump? This is the hypocrisy that I think is really going to cause a real big problem. And the censorship that they're imposing now, I really do think, the show, What Are the Odds, right? What are the odds this will lead to more violence? 100%. I think that in the end, you just cannot have a 2-tier system like this, Robert, and people get mad at it.
They're telling people the courts are closed, Congress is closed, everything is closed. If you stick your head up, we're going to smack you around. We're going to take away your job, take away your social media access, take away your meaningful speech and associational rights that could be impactful, and maybe just take away your physical freedom and lock you up.
Yeah, that's next, Robert. That's next, and you know it. I mean, this is how this stuff devolves. People have been living with this false sense of security, and this is why I called it hologram liberty, because wait until it's tested. Wait until you reach out and touch it. If you think this can't happen, you're nuts. We are not in the exception to the rule. We were once exceptional, but we were not an exception, and we better stop lecturing foreign powers and other regimes about human rights and inalienable rights. We just don't have the moral high ground or the moral authority anymore, Robert. We don't have it. This is something that's 20 years ago you would never have imagined that people would be persecuted like this for their beliefs. In 4 years, look, they're talking about, I saw you tweet about it, so they're talking about no-fly lists for these people. So in 4 years, supporting Donald Trump and his agenda went from a political opinion to an act of terror?
No-fly list for terror. People on the no-fly list who the feds had already cleared of not doing anything criminal solely because they were at the rally. So here's that other thing. How did that no-fly list get done so fast?
Right.
So, supposedly they had no idea it was coming. That's what the FBI told the Capitol Police. Didn't need a major security event. Didn't need a normal. Capitol Police has 2,400 plus police officers. They could have easily secured the Capitol. They chose not to. The number of people who actually breached was a much smaller group. And the reason they didn't choose to secure the Capitol is because the FBI led them to believe that everything was going to be cool and kosher. And so that raises its own questions. And yet the FBI right away knew which message boards to target, knew which people to target, knew which people to put up on list, even people that had no criminal involvement. Seems to suggest they already had their list.
They already knew, Robert. They already knew.
For the conspiracy theorist, this has all the hallmarks of a 9/11 staged event. And they're going to be all over it. That somebody put things in motion, let things take their own, like, especially if it turns out QAnon is tied to some sort of government. And I mean, they just got PSYOP army officers from North Carolina who were part of the leading group.
That's right.
I don't know if you saw that. Local media in North Carolina reported. One of the guys that's in the PSYOPs, the actual PSYOPs unit. I was like, isn't that interesting?
That's like the PSYOPs warfare unit, right, in Fort Bragg. It's absolutely, I know exactly where
they run the PSYOPs unit. You can get all their videos. My favorite one is the 1968 video, where this was back when the Army was honest. Now they put up all, pretty looking, everything's fine and kosher and sweet and whatever. But back in 1968, they showed how PSYOPs really work. And they're like, they had a fake country, and they were sitting around. They're like, we need internal defense from the subversive elements. And this one general character is supposed to be from this fake foreign country says, I really need some of your psychological operations officers. I mean, the way they do it, they're selling just. You can find it on YouTube, folks. Look up 1968 PSYOP Army. It's amazing. But and everybody in Congress was on script, and Biden was on script, and big tech was on script.
Biden's speech was the tip-off for me, Robert. Biden's speech was the
exactly.
tip-off.
It was people who I think everybody except Trump knew what was coming.
Yeah. And you talk about this, I mean, really, and the Federalist put up a couple good articles about this, but this is the man, he uses the word insurrection, this from the man whose idea it was to use the Logan Act to subvert the new incoming president, to go after criminally, the new incoming transition team for the president, using the word incite, this coming from the guy who literally launched his campaign video based on the false, phony, dangerous, very fine people hoax, which there is nobody who is going to tell me. Maybe at first Biden was just an old, dumb, senile guy who was being told by his advisors that Donald Trump really did say that. But over time, you'd have to be living under a rock and a complete idiot. And maybe Biden is this bad. He's worse than even I think he is. But you'd have to be this stupid not to see the evidence. I mean, there were just so many people that put it up. Even Jake Tapper said he didn't say that. And Jake Tapper is all in on this fraud right now. He's another one. When they're going to suspend Jake Tapper?
The purge.
James Hodgkinson, who was the shooter in the baseball game, who's the one who shot up Republicans practicing for the charitable congressional baseball game, he fully believed, because we took those posts before Mark Zuckerberg had it purged from history so nobody would know. He did that, Robert, because he believed two things. One, that Donald Trump, Robert, was indeed a traitor who colluded with Vladimir Putin and stole the U.S. election. He believed there was a traitor in the White House, and that his last post said somebody has to stop the traitor. And then the second thing that he rambled on and on about, which we reported on People's Pundit Daily, you guys can go see those screenshots now. He believed that if Republicans repealed Obamacare, that people in his family and people who he cared about were going to die. Where did he get it from? Elizabeth Warren, who said on the floor of the U.S. Senate, because that is what he commented on. And I'm talking about right before he grabbed the rifle and started spraying down Republicans and almost killed Steve Scalise, the House Majority Whip at the time. He gunned down, folks. Think about this. Why isn't Jake Tapper? Why isn't CNN? Why isn't MSNBC? Why isn't MSNBC? And all the blue check marks that work for them, why aren't they banned? Why aren't they restricted, right? This is such a load of crap. This guy would never have gotten in that van and shot up yes, he was mentally disturbed. The point is, though, they're using the argument that Trump had to go because he was inciting violence. And that's what the emails tell me when they say, if I talk about election fraud one more time, because you're inciting violence. That's what they tell me. Well what about the violence they incite? We should
probably check all the YouTube's videos for all of the election fraud allegations from 2016. And you just flag in YouTube say, oh, this is incitement. Look at these people talking about election hijacking, election. Oh, look. And of course, who would that be? It'd be Nancy Pelosi.
Yep.
It'd be Bernie Sanders. It'd be Elizabeth Warren. It would be Adam Schiff. it would be these very dangerous people. But what
Eric
what I've been saying
Swalwell.
for a while about the left is that it's increasingly statist. That even
Yes.
its quote unquote populist wing is mostly statist more than it's actually populist.
Yeah.
And Joe Biden, if you look at Biden, who he most reminds me of is like Brezhnev. He reminds me of like a 1970s Soviet style leader.
Yeah.
Who believes his own nonsense, believes his own gibberish, things like he convinced himself of the Charlottesville hoax, even though it was clearly, a hoax, and he had plenty of knowledge and access to knowledge to show it was. He just convinced himself of it the way a communist official would in the 1970s. They would just blank out information. I mean, the ultimate expose of them was Chernobyl, because what happened in Chernobyl was they said a great HBO film on it, four-part series on it.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
There hasn't really been a nuclear problem here. Because that's the mindset that it leads you to. It leads you to, nah, there's no meltdown. Not happening. It's burning right outside the window. Nope, not happening. That's fake news. And that's the mindset that people like Biden have taught themselves over the years, because he needs to lie effectively, so he has to lie to himself. And he's learned to lie to himself about. I mean, when his inauguration speech.
So he's pathological.
United.
So he's pathological. Biden is
he's doing mass arrests of his opponents, while he's calling for the impeachment and removal and imprisonment of his prior political campaign opponent.
Yeah.
But while he's saying certain speech can't be used, while he's calling for complete social media bans in the public square of people he dislikes, he's going to talk about unity. It's just insane. It's Soviet 1970s style governance. And if people want the best analogy to know what's coming, it's going to be that mindset.
Yeah, I was actually thinking, Robert, it's like a Soviet mentality with a fascist system, because like the Jack Dorseys and the Zuckerbergs, they're really like fascism for people who really don't understand. We've been told a fake definition of fascism because we always think of the Nazis. The Nazis had a racial element, but in truth, fascism is a form of socialism that just allows corporations to pretend that they lead it really, but they're all really melded together with the state, right? So they're just directing the state.
Like the Chicom model.
Yeah, very, very much like the Chicom. It's like, we have the ministry of, and those people tell them what to do, or really, they don't even have to tell them because their interests are the same in many cases, right? So, it's unbelievable, Robert. I mean, really, I don't think that we can get away from that anymore. I really think it's important we start to level with ourselves where we are here, right? Like, so it's not like
need to build independent information networks, independent distribution networks, and have independent populist reform. The other mistake they're making is they think if they take out Trump, populism disappears.
I know.
and that's where they're completely wrong. And if anything, populism needed to divorce itself from dependence on Trump. Like we've been saying, a man is not a movement. So the man can be part of the movement, can help spearhead the movement, but it can't be just about him. Yeah. And what they're forcing that to happen, ironically. Like they're going to force people to use independent, like blockchain-based technology. Like I'm on Locals. It's vivabarneslaw.locals.com. Set up because they have multiple contingency plans in place. They're structured so they can't be taken off tomorrow.
Just went up today, Robert, right before. The first post is our episode. I saw yours. I shared it. And then they were like, hey, you want to throw it up there? I'm like, let's do it. I mean, it's not totally intact yet, but we're on now. And
so you are. So what are you on Locals as?
At People's Pundit, because I figured that's what it is. Because I was
underscore, no underscore,
no underscore. Because really, that came from somebody using that handle, and I remember contacting you about this years ago. Twitter refused. I was like, look, this is trademark infringement. Do you understand? They didn't care. They refused to take this guy's handle away. And he hadn't tweeted in forever. Sometimes, and just so people understand, you have to race out. If you want to get a persona, a personality, whatever it is, you better race out and get that domain. You better, whether or not you intend to use that social media, at presently or maybe in the future, you better race out and grab that user name or handle, because these people have nothing better to do than to try to take stuff from you that they know you're going to want. And then they'll either not give it to you because they don't want you to succeed, or they'll hold you hostage for some absurd amount of money. So you have to do that. Like I went out, got People's Pundit Daily, of course, then peoplespundit.com, then People's Pundit TV. Then you have to do all of that because sure, you can have People's Pundit.tv, which is where we're going, by the way. You can have that for $5,000. You know what I mean? Some ridiculous thing because they got it first. But then there's the worst where they will not sell it to you, Robert, because they don't want you to succeed. They're liberal. They view you as a conservative voice or something. So they just want to block you from doing business, which is really part of this danger. This is one of the biggest dangers. It's not just taking someone's free speech rights away. What's going on here? In many of these cases, like look at Dan Bongino, right? In many of these cases, you're taking their livelihood. If Fox dumps him as a contributor tomorrow, he's in deep trouble. So Dan is one thing, but if you do this to the masses, to the movement itself, how do you think they're going to react then? You're trying to squash the possibility of violence. You are creating more violence.
And I think that's what they want. I don't think down deep they want to quash violence.
Yeah.
They want an excuse and a pretext to seize more rights and limit more liberties. And for that, I mean, I got the impression when I was in town that they had expected much worse outcome of what happened at Capitol Hill.
Wow,
and almost like they wanted it to justify where they were going. I mean, we have a new Patriot Act bill that about to get through, domestic terrorism bill. They're sort of quietly promoting that, and then they're using this as their pretext to launch it, using this as the pretext to discredit Trump forever, try to impeach him again, the whole point of the impeachment is to prevent him from ever running for election again.
Absolutely.
And all that does is free up things. It's like, they really think that no one will ever replace Trump. And that if they shame Cruz and shame Hawley and shame these congressmen, I mean, calling to expel them, we've never had calls to expel congressmen or senators based on their policy positions before. I mean, we are breaking every constitutional custom we've ever had.
Yeah,
these people are they have no limits, no restriction, no restraint. They live in echo chambers. They have all the consolidated power now. They already had the economic power, the cultural power, the social power. Now they have the political power. Yeah. They have all three branches of government. And they probably don't care what the court does. And I mean, now all of a sudden,
the court wouldn't do anything anyway. They're cowards, Robert, and you know it.
Oh, well, that's true. But they have a senator from West Virginia talking about stacking the Senate. After he was, he wouldn't do anything like that. Now he's like, well, I got to look at the arguments, both sides. He's the one who called for Twitter to take down Trump.
Absolutely. And DC statehood, they're calling the DC mayors calling on Biden to do it within the first 100 days. They had been talking about gun rights for 3 days. Biden is an idiot and slipped up. So if you see that headline, that's solely because Biden is a senile fool. And he didn't mean to say that, but he basically said the NRA will not survive his administration. So first, the First Amendment, then the Second Amendment.
They still don't understand. The NRA is just members. And a lot of members have been increasingly unhappy with the NRA now going on a decade or so.
Yep.
So if they just take out the NRA, it's replaced by any of the other groups that are actually better and more effective. And now what his real goal is my guess is they're probably going to want some kind of red flag type event that they can claim a red flag would have prevented. I think they wanted that to happen here. But because I think national red flag laws are going to be their pretext to massive gun grabs.
Yeah,
that's where they're really going.
Yeah, red flag is it. That's
First
why
Amendment, there will be no right that will not be under threat from the new administration.
That's why Trump at least got the NRA in his ear, and because he was going to jump on red flag laws for a second. You remember that? And then the NRA got in his ear. He watched his.
People quit pretending that fake pirate with his little eye patch just because he served overseas as some sort of magical hero.
I'm getting sick of that.
Phony is a $3 bill.
Yeah, I was a $2 bill, actually, a $2 bill. I am sick of people using their military service as an excuse for why they can just trample all over rights without question, right?
And send everybody else to war. If you love it, you can go back. You don't got to send my kids.
Knock yourself out, Dan. You want to go lose your other eye? Knock yourself out. All right. Yeah. Don't go sending my son, who's coming up on age in a couple of years, to foreign wars that you just want to fight to, fill the purse of your benefactors. Knock yourself out. And this Colin Powell crap, I got to put in the bed. I got to put to bed for once and for all. I've been through this a million times. As someone who served in the Army, let me tell you, first, let's start with the Army. Not only is he not well respected among the enlisted men anymore, he's viewed as a turncoat and a traitor. So that's number one. Yes, he was highly respected back in the left hook days. Those days are over. Or the right hook. It was a right hook. Those days are over. And he hasn't been a Republican for years, since Bush and Cheney bitched him into lying to the world about WMDs. Him turning into a Democrat, Robert, was nothing ideological. It was personal. It was like, he doesn't even have principle enough to like make it about some like deep held conviction. He was used like a I'm not even going to say it. He was used like a $2 Taiwan, you know what, and tossed aside. And that's why he voted for Barack Obama. Let's get this out of it. I am so sick of the media going to him. And now, Colin Powell just announced he's not a Republican. He didn't even vote for Mitt Romney. All right.
Well, you know who else they're dragging out is apparently right after the inauguration, Biden and the Bushes will go over to the Forgotten Soldier Memorial. How ironic. These warmongers who've done more to put people in those military cemeteries than any two politicians in modern history.
That's right.
Going to honor the forgotten soldier. But
people should know Biden backing the Iraq War was a big pivot point.
Gaslighting is if people think the gaslighting during the Obama era was something, they got nothing coming. The polls are going to be ridiculous. 90% of America hates Trump and loves Joe Biden. It's going to be absurd polls, just absurd. They're all narrative shapers now anyway. They never have to face any punishment or penalty for being absurdly wrong, like they were for the fourth straight election.
Fourth straight election, Robert.
And instead they'll just be, they figure if we censor everybody, gatekeep everything, and then we can gaslight the masses. That's the plan. And that's why everybody's got with the real resistance begins now. Not the corporate-backed, corporate-sponsored, fake resistance we've had for the last 4 years, like these Apple commercials I was watching during the playoffs with like "Fight the System" by Apple. I was like, come. I mean, how dumb
by the system?
Whole millennial generation. We should. I second guess my thoughts about the draft when I see millennials.
Kidding.
Maybe the draft wouldn't be all bad. Any member of the millennial generation should probably have to serve for 6 years.
I got a friend. He's a total fool. He was a resist movement. I've known him since we were kids. He was. I'm like, man, because we were all '90s references, right? And I'm like, you're not raging against the machine, bro. You are the machine. Do you understand? You are the machine. There is no. It's like so fun. All the people who said they're gonna. Trump and his supporters was such a threat to the norms and the institutions and the values. They are the ones who destroyed the norms, the institutions, and the values. Those who said they were, opposing the fascists, you are the fascist. I mean, it's so totally backward. And in fact, you couldn't even use the word Orwellian on Twitter the other day, Robert. They were blocking it from being from trending. I saw it like 5 times. Orwellian popped up and was vanished in a heartbeat, because if you're on desktop, you can see it a lot better than if you're using it on your mobile. And somebody had tweeted to me, look, see if you can see how many tweets about, this is Orwellian, that's Orwellian. They were doing it. They were pulling it down from the trend as quick as it was going up. And it had far more mentions than anything stupid that they put up. Now they flatly manipulate that trend. Of course, we all know that, but I mean really bad. Something can have 500,000, 1 million, maybe more mentions or retweets within a 30-minute period, an hour period, and they will remove it for something with 2,000, 3,000. It's crazy. I mean, it's just crazy, but that's where we are. That's where we are.
Algorithmic manipulation, massive censorship, massive gaslighting, massive gatekeeping. They've been building up to do this for the last 4 years, have been lying and saying they weren't going to do it during the election to end and during the runoffs in Georgia. And as soon as that was over, they were ready to rock and roll, using as a pretext what took place at the Capitol. So people need to be prepared for it. Look at alternative methods of email servers. I'll look at browsers that are the most protected. I'll give you a hint. Chrome ain't in that list. There are several. Apparently, Mozilla is going to start censoring by using its web browser to now censor information. There's Tor, there's Brave, there's several reliable servers out there that protect your privacy and are not subject to censorship.
I like Tor. The problem is with some of the stuff.
Everybody get Signal today. Get Signal on your phones today. Start messaging by Signal. Start calling through Signal. You can set it up and schedule it so it'll automatically delete things from your phone.
Wire's another good one too. I like Wire.
Wire's a good one. Well, it's great. Signal is open source and it has no central. It's an encrypted communication. When what that means is it doesn't keep any communication in a centralized location. If you're texting with a regular texting program, or you're using Facebook Messenger or something else, all that is stored and kept at a centralized location. The government can tap anytime they want. They can't with Signal. I mean, the person who told me to get Signal was the head of security for the National Security Council. Before he would communicate with me several years ago about a case, he required I get Signal. I was like, I guess Signal's pretty good. So start to prepare in your individual life for that. Support the independent networks of information that you value, understanding you're going to prioritize. There are going to be some you subscribe to. There's going to be some you're just a member of the board. The advantage of what Richard's talking about with locals is you don't have to pay to subscribe at all. You can be a member. There will be an exclusive VIP content section for subscribers.
Yeah, that's what we're going to do.
Section for that. If you can subscribe, the reason to do so is because it helps make it possible to continue the economic viability of this model. On our Viva and Barnes, it's Viva Barnes Law. It's $5 a month, so it's not exactly pricey. But I understand people can only do so much. Just join the board then. You don't have to pay the $5, and at least there'll be a place where you can get independent information because the gaslighting and gatekeeping is going to be off the charts. I mean, I'm going to start looking at 70s dissident writers from Soviet Eastern Europe. To really get a sense of what the mentality is, what the mindset is, how do you keep the communication open, how you manage to stay with a positive attitude in a difficult environment, because we're going to face the closest thing to that outside of wartime. I mean, World War II, we took away all Japanese American civil rights for about 3 years. In World War I, we put Eugene V. Debs in prison just for giving a speech. So we've had bad examples. Abraham Lincoln suspended habeas corpus and it didn't even apply in the North, so he can lock up his dissidents. So so we've had some bad examples. I mean, John Adams tried to push through the Alien Institution so he could lock up the press that was being critical of him. So we've had some examples of this, just never when it's not wartime. So that's why they're trying to create a fake wartime environment between the pandemic and exaggerating what happened at Capitol Hill so they can push through new laws that criminalize basic behavior. And they know that the courts may not come to the defense of the Constitution because most of them have not during the pandemic pretext to suspend the Constitution and did not for President Trump to have election integrity. So that's part one. Stage two is the stuff that those of us that are active within the public arena, court of public opinion, is doing. It's not only bringing you insight and content that's independent, that's outside of the gatekeeper control, so that you can break through the gatekeeper institutional narrative, as Eric Weinstein calls it, but also, we'll be launching and maybe we'll do it through a PAC, maybe we'll do it through an LLC. I don't want to do it necessarily through a 501c. The risk with a 501c is it takes about a year for it to be approved. And now this is all going to be
what we're running into now, as a matter of fact, Robert. That's exactly what we're running into now. It's
and now it's going to be Biden's IRS people running this.
They're going to.
I don't really want to be subject to Biden's IRS people monitoring who the donors are or anything like that. So I'm thinking about either a PAC or maybe just a basic LLC that just has full transparency about income and expenses. The Free America Law Center that I started that'll be part of this is just a basic LLC because I knew of the IRS harassment risk from having handled some of those cases on behalf of Tea Party.
Oh yeah.
For people don't know, the IRS they actually did two targeting. They targeted anybody associated with the Tea Party name in their organization for harassment on tax grounds because they control 501c3 and 501c4 organizations, and they have a lot of little tricks of ways to trap people in that world. The second thing they did is they were actually the enforcement mechanism for Obamacare, so they were grabbing everybody's medical records all across the country without them knowing. I brought the suit that put an end to it. Biggest Bivens class action in American history, sued on behalf of 60 million Americans whose medical records were illicitly stolen and seized by the IRS. Now they try to punish my client with the criminal tax prosecution. That, I mean, I got involved through that means, but ultimately they had to walk away from that as well. So or settle on very favorable terms. But you can guess they're going to weaponize it. One problem I
Worse than Obama.
in the Trump world, they didn't purge the bad actors in key parts of the IRS. Everybody's going to be feeling their oats. They've been waiting for the moment. This is Empire Strikes Back time.
That's right. It's a great analogy. It really is. That's a great analogy. You had New Hope, and now this is Empire Strikes Back. And it's going to be, you think it was bad under Obama. The targeting was bad under Obama. You really haven't seen anything. That's nothing.
Nothing like what's coming.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're talking about weaponizing the Justice Department to go after people who had who enforced Trump immigration policy.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to actually criminalize policy disagreement. They're going to criminalize political disagreement.
Absolutely.
They're trying to get MAGA rallies denoted as a domestic terror event, even if it even occurs. Now, that according to Paul Sperry at Real Clear Investigations, and he's been more ahead of the curve than behind it. So there's a lot. I mean, they're going to push every inane idea that you could conceive of. I mean, if you would have told me 4 years ago that social media will actually block the president of the United States from communicating to his own population, and that the Speaker of the House would call the Joint Chiefs of Staff and ask them to do a military coup and take away the president's power over the military affairs, I'd say, that sounds a little bit too much like those old movies. But we just had it happen in the same week.
Yep.
So what Pelosi did is coup-like. I mean,
absolutely.
It's asking the military to seize control over the military from the president of the United States.
Robert, that's the definition. That is the
literally
they've been on a coup for 4 years, Robert. That was always the correct word. Joe Biden and Barack Obama put in place the mechanisms of a coup before they left office. That's it. That is the definition of it. There's no other. The Logan Act. Come on. Even Jonathan Turley is this pretty fair guy. Even Alan Dershowitz, he's more controversial. Only the Lawrence tribes of the world is an idiot. For people who don't know, he's a total idiot.
How corrupt did Bill Barr turn out to be?
Oh,
he rushed to condemn the president when his speech had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, turns out Bill Barr was an establishment plant the entire time.
Robert, who recommended Bill? Because I'll tell you this, I didn't know him that much, and people were telling me he's an institutionalist.
I mean, he grew up on the Upper West Side with Mommy and Daddy.
Yeah.
I mean, with Daddy writing. Daddy, the guy who had put Jeffrey Epstein into business, hired him first guy to give him a job, hired him at the elite prep school, the Dalton School, while he was busy writing science fiction books that deal with the underage child sex obsessions.
I wanted
Bill Barr's father. That's where he comes from.
I wanted John Ratcliffe for the Attorney General. I knew it was going to be a hard case, but I thought it was, it was for Trump. That was worth it, and that was the way to go because only John was going to have the courage and the principle. You can say what you want about John Ratcliffe, and the Democrats did. He was a U.S. attorney. I mean, there's nothing. He had enough experience. Look, we've had idiots for attorney generals that had less experience than John Ratcliffe had when he was nominated and had to withdraw. And that, he wasn't nominated for that. He was nominated for.
This goes all the way back.
First.
Sessions was the wrong guy to put in that position.
Oh, man,
could have put Rudy would have been good in that position.
Yeah. I think it
hard for him to have turned him down at the time. He had some. The problem Rudy had is after he left the U.S. Attorney's office, he was known as Cash and Carry Rudy in D.C. So that was the problem, and so all of that was going to come out, and all of the stuff, and so that's
Saudi
why
Arabia stuff.
Drawn, but he still should have just pushed through. You couldn't trust Chris Christie. But I mean, again, all of this was because Trump didn't line his cabinet with and his administration with people that supported him. That's on Trump. I mean, he was told not to do this. He ignored it. And now he's facing the consequences. And he's dealing with the cumulative level of shock at the level of number of people around him who are totally disloyal.
Yeah.
I mean, what are any of these Republicans thinking politically? I get they have a temporary excuse and pretext for them abandoning him on the election contest issues because of what happened at Capitol Hill.
I think they're thinking the information warfare is going to work, Robert. That's what I think.
I think they think we're going to go back to 2012.
Yeah.
And it'll just be that the natural sequence of events in their minds was that in 2016, they would have an establishment. They would have Jeb Bush as president. And we would, just be a continuation of the same politics since the late 1980s.
Right.
And it's like, man, how do they still believe this? But it's because, one, they have bogus polling. So that they, two, they're completely out of touch with the public, but in general, I mean, there's such a I call it a carriage society, because you remember the people that sit in nice little carriages while all the plebes and the farmers are on the, on the outskirts of the streets, and the kids are all, in suit and all that kind of thing. And, they're in their little top hats with the thing. That's how they think. I mean, they've grown completely out of touch. When I was up there, they're terrified. That's the other reason they're lashing out so bad.
Yeah.
They're terrified. Not only are they mortified, the commoners. The commoners came into their house.
That's scary.
Their house because they think they own it, not you, the public.
Yep, that's true.
They think it's theirs. And they're mortified. What else do the peasants think? What else are the peasants going to do? Am I going to be like poor Lindsey Graham and they all tell me I'm a total cuck while I'm walking through the airport? They can't handle these people. They just have no I remember it was when I was in law school, and I was dealing with
very Hamilton-like views.
Oh yeah,
unwashed, filthy masses. The not well born is what he would say.
Right. I always like to remind people the great founders are the people who led the American Revolution and passed the Bill of Rights. And that's all that's as much a Boston fisherman and a Midwestern farmer as it is any elite person.
They were that's right. They were tradesmen and farmers, and I mean, John Adams.
There is no revolution.
George
Washington wasn't even a great general, folks. I mean, God bless him, but nobody in the army, they don't teach George Washington's military strategy as their lead course and tactics.
Cut and run and keep it together.
Yeah, the reason the American Revolution happened was because a bunch of juries decided they weren't going to enforce a whole bunch of laws like seditious libel laws, like tax laws.
Yeah, they
said, okay, he didn't pay his tax. We'll fine him the lowest possible fine of $1, which was far less than the tax he owed.
The Murderous Act.
And then there were people sitting in taverns listening to Thomas Paine's Common Sense and realizing, why does the king claim to rule us? And it started, the reason why they're so mortified is it started with events like the most visual things from the Capitol will be how ordinary people saw this as their building. Will be that people in Viking outfits and Buffalo Bill outfits, hanging out in the speaker's chair. Will be that blue collar guy from Arkansas sticking his feet up in Nancy Pelosi's office. Because that's really populist symbolism that offends them so bad. Because that's not destroying property. That's not hurting people.
No, they didn't deface anything, Robert. They didn't kill any cops like that.
They didn't even take any. Like, that was the Babylon Bee joke. Idiot Republicans stage riot. Failed to even steal a single TV.
Yeah.
That's the sort of mindset mentality that they have. So that's why they're horrified, and that's why they're going to crack down. They look at, okay, how did Trump win? Well, one, take out Trump. Take out his whole family. Two, that's why they probably will now escalate criminal prosecution and investigations on Don Jr.,
Absolutely.
Ivanka, Kushner, the whole family.
They're going to go after him. There's no doubt, Robert. No doubt.
I mean, it wouldn't be, knowing Trump, he has a natural instinct to fight. But if he's not inclined to fight, he'll probably just hop a plane right to Brazil.
Where Bolsonaro would like
with Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro would be good with it. I was talking to Brazilians last week. They love. What's fascinating is at times Trump is more loved in like Japan and Brazil than he is definitely than parts of the United States
and Poland.
Poland,
they love him in India too. I was like shocked.
I'm going to be on the end of the week with George Gammon on Friday because there's other backup plans people should be putting in place. Yeah. You should have technological backup plans where you're going to get your and support where you're going to support people outside of the institutional network so you can keep getting independent information and constructive action. Richard and I will be launching the Election Integrity Project very soon, coming up with templates. I'm thinking multiple things. One is templates, all the different explaining to people how election laws work as part of self-education.
This way, and certain things would never have circulated if we were there to do that, Robert, right? So we had the podcast, and I had Inside the Numbers where I was trying to explain, but if there would be a place that they could have gone and said, do votes really go overseas? How does this work? Then we would have been able to prevent some of this. One thing, I don't know about you, but I'm beating myself up a little bit.
explain also to sort of give people templates for election contests, templates for circulating petitions. I'll be bringing a bunch of lawsuits and challenging nominating petitions, or challenging the rules that limit nominating petitions, how to do recalls, how to do initiatives, how to do referendums, how to do it at every single level of government, local, city, county, state. And where you can be impactful in federal elections, which PACs are going to, and we may even create a PAC to help filter and direct either donations or political activity. Accurate polling is going to be critical because the gaslighting with bad polling is going to be off the charts over the next 4 years.
Already, yeah.
Congressmen need accurate polling. The Senate, when I met with Trump's legal team up in D.C., if there were congressmen that still didn't have good information, had they been given good information, he would have had 180, 190 votes out of the House. Almost every Republican would have voted with him. But it was because they had not been given good intel and because Powell and Wood's nonsense had dominated and clouded the situation. But basically, providing information and self-education. Also, I think we should, as part of the Election Integrity Project, ways like a self-help manual about how to run your own campaign. What goes into that? Here are the tools. Here are the people, and getting tools that are not like what the Trump campaign used. In other words, not having a campaign fundraising tool that big tech can take away from you overnight, or an email service that can be taken away from you overnight.
Yeah, let me just tell people real quick because they've been asking about that. I tweeted out the newsletter. I didn't tweet it out. I put it in the message thing. Guys, that's People's Pundit Daily. They can't take that. They can't even look at that. We built that. All right. That's on our servers.
The web address.
Yeah. The news, peoplespunditdaily.com/newsletters. When you sign up there, that is not a MailChimp or any of them, whatever the other ones are. I can't even remember because it's been so long since I ever considered needing one. We built our own. So it was an old plugin called MyMail, and they turned into Mailster. And they basically were like, you don't have to use these people. You have your own server. You could build it on the server. It's not, and that's what we did because I got to tell you, a lot of this was not terribly hard to predict. You just have to have an open mind, and you can't have that false sense of security, that false sense of liberty. It was coming. This was coming. It would have been 4 years ago. Really, the idea that Trump beat Clinton because there was too much information, Robert, dominated D.C. for years.
There wasn't enough gatekeeper control.
That's
too much information got out to the masses.
Yes,
and the gates were breached.
Yeah,
and in sort of the old medieval imagery in terms of information. But because like Richard has designed several of these different things so that people can utilize. So the goal is to provide, here's how you can build a mailing list and mass mail. I think locals may be a part of that. Theoretically, I don't see why. Theoretically, you could use a locals board for each candidate, right? And people could become donors through the locals board. It's also a way to stay in constant communication with your core audience. In other words, the things that Facebook pages were being used for, locals could easily replace.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that it could be used for candidates and causes, as well as independent sources of independent creators and independent information about law and politics and data like you get from Richard and me and other people. But so the goal will be to create like a template of, because I'm getting tons of people asking, saying, I want to run for something because I want to help. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And they're asking, how do I do it? And I'm like, well, we'll create. Richard and I will help create that. Here's how this works. So that you can do it on your own. And then there may be places where we can help, but there are other places where we're just giving you the tools for you to do so. I was actually on the front end with a lawyer mentor of mine 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, starting self-help mechanisms for divorces and orders of protection and stuff like that. That was way ahead of the curve. Now you can get that almost anywhere because a lot of, family law remedies, trust remedies, estate remedies, a lot of the basic ones you can do with self-help techniques. And we were ahead of the curve on that. And the goal is to do the same thing in the entire election context. And not only for people who want to be candidates, but also sort of crowdsource. Like the reality is, Trump never did this, unfortunately. Maybe he will when he gets out. Maybe he won't. I don't know yet. But I'm not going to wait on it. that we can help create a place of, okay, where can I support populist candidates anywhere in the country? Independent, open reformer candidates, whether it's city council, county commission, state representative, state senator, United States Congress, United States, whatever level of power it is, or to get on election boards. Provide a one-stop shop location where there's sort of somebody doing that curating, if you will, that the ordinary person doesn't have time to do.
Yeah.
Or even if they had the time to do, they don't have the easy means to do.
And that's how they survived this long, Robert. That's how they survived this long unopposed, because they have not had tools like that.
Exactly. Yep. The other thing is how to access your system of government. So I'm going to create, templated Open Records Act request forms for every single state that has some form of it, whether it's Open Records Act, sometimes called Sunshine Laws, sometimes called Freedom of Information Act. Also, how you can use the Freedom of Information Act and the Privacy Act to get information on government sources, how to crowdsource information related to how the political project works. And so part of that's about elections. It'll be specific and tailored to elections, but you'll be able to utilize it for governmental integrity in general. And the goal is to popularize and democratize what Judicial Watch does. So you don't have to just depend on Judicial Watch because they have limited resources. You can ask your local county, I would like to see the printed ballots from my precinct set.
Yep.
And you might find very interesting things. Or I want the signature match audit review for my precinct. And maybe then you're only paying for copies. A lot of this stuff is digitized, so it shouldn't cost that much anymore. They should be able to give it to you on a USB drive, and we'll provide the information about that, provide the forms to request it, the templates that did it, much as we did with the templated letters that sent out. A lot of people sent to senators and congressmen. That was the seed for the idea that Ted Cruz ultimately adopted, which would have got a lot of votes in the Senate, but for what happened. Now, that's something pitiful.
Yeah, they killed it.
You're a United States senator, and you're scared of a few people raiding the Capitol? What a crock. You should resign right now if you're that kind of coward. You have no business in the United States Senate.
100 years ago, Robert, that never would have happened. I mean, they would never.
They used to beat each other up and threaten to shoot each other on the Senate floor.
He tried to shoot Andrew Jackson and nearly beat the guy to death with his cane. I mean, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And
That's my view. It was the way Jimmy Breslin described New York City. He was like, now that Times Square was all cleaned up, he said, I hate it. He goes, I don't want Disney Times Square. That's not New York. I want gritty Times Square. I want knife fights in the alleys. I want the 5-cent theaters open and rolling because that's Times Square. I want the sailors who can't wait to raid Times Square. That's who I want. Where there's free booze and other things. So but I was like, that's more authentic. I want senators with guts and gall, not senators that are weak and with cowardice. Yeah. And I wasn't shocked, but if I had been Hawley, if I'd been Cruz, I would have given a righteous speech when I came back.
No kidding.
Said, this is a time to show that we believe in constitutional liberty and we will respect the constitutional process and are not intimidated either direction by anything anybody does outside. To do anything differently, to act in cowardice will be an embarrassment to yourself and to this institution and to our country. But, unfortunately, the reason why they believe they can take out Trump and kill populism is because there's not a single person in the Senate they fear.
They don't have any big men
here, but not that much. And that's why we need thousands of populists, thousands of reformers, thousands of outsiders, thousands of challengers at every level of government, or taking government into your own hands in the sense of using the Freedom of Information Act and the Open Records Act. You're also going to help try to link to sources as part of the Election Integrity Project, but link to other lawsuits and legal cases, but link to ways to do crowdsourced journalism and data research. And those techniques as well. So help show people how, all the self-help techniques. And then on top of that, we'll be taking specific legal action ourselves where we can to get more information and develop a template legislation. Because like we talked about last week, my impression is that there is a window of opportunity with a lot of state legislators. Now they're trying to use what happened on the 6th to totally take that away.
That's right.
And so, but all of these state legislatures are going to be up either in 2021 in Virginia, 2022 in most other states. So they're still going to be under pressure. And they'll probably figure out about a year from now that Trumpism and populism
is not going away.
Yeah. And if they want a chance at re-election, they're going to need a pitch. And the goal is we want to give them that pitch by saying, hey, we were part of election law reform. And what we do is use Richard's data analysis and my legal understanding and come up with templated legislation that's simple and straightforward. One, to try to get the legislatures to take action. If they don't, look at ways we can provide a templated referendum or initiative that ordinary people can organize to get on the ballot. Because it's time to reinvigorate those old direct democratic mechanisms.
That's right. It's the only way out, Robert.
Going to show people how to do recalls of everybody they could possibly recall, how, what kind of petitions they need, what the legal standards are, what the administrative protocols are, and will be available to litigate those cases where they're trying to prevent people because they have watch the governor of in the California case, but also watch when they try to recall the Secretary of State in Georgia, which is coming. Watch the different signature match tests start to come into play. So
all of a sudden,
I'm going to bring food everywhere, and my suit's going to be, I want the same signature match test for nominating petitions that they used for the ballots. Because I've been told it's the most secure and accurate. And the judges have said it's so perfect. So surely we can have the same standards apply. Watch these courts go, but so we'll watch the government actors do it and expose the fraud. But either way, I'm going to win because either they're going to admit that their signature match standards for absentee ballots are fraudulent, or they're going to have to say we have to lower the standards so that basically every signature is going to count on a nominating petition. And that'll make it far easier because also part of this, not only for initiatives and referendums and independent candidates to get on the ballot, but for third parties to have access to the ballot because that may be necessary depending on what happens. Republicans really want to kill Trumpism and populism. If they actually keep going down that path, frankly, what they're encouraging is you might as well form a third party at that point.
Even with the garbage with the mail-in vote, Robert, if Howie Hawkins was not removed from the ballot on some of these states, Joe Biden would have lost anyway. We know that from our polling. He was well within that margin to take 2 to 3% off of Joe Biden in these states, and it would have been a ghost for him. He'd have been done, Robert. It would have been no way because, not no way because they could have just dipped into, stuff, But the point being, there wasn't enough in some of these states. Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, definitely, and then perhaps even Michigan. All he needed was 2.5 points in Michigan to get within that range anyway. So
especially if you had both Kanye, because wasn't Kanye off the ballot all those states?
They booted him in every single state. They booted him in Arizona. They booted him in everything.
They booted him in Wisconsin. Yeah, and I don't think he got on in Michigan or Pennsylvania that I know.
No, there
would have been some Kanye votes in those states in particular. So and it didn't require a lot to get over the top for Trump. But that's where, in order for third parties to be a viable option, and the other thing is you want a third party to be a viable option is leverage. It's the only thing that will keep the Republican Party disciplined is if they really think a populist third party will start. Right now they think, hey, if we just take out Trump, we don't have to worry about a third party independent challenge either. And they need education that that's not the case, that some sort of Trumpish oriented party have access to the ballot, don't have to exercise that leverage, but just that leverage being there will change the equation. Because the reality is, if there was a real Trump third party movement, Republican Party would be killed in 4 years.
Done. And if they go through with what I am hearing, by the way, that there is real effort to get him to leave the office today. I'm not kidding, but Parler to Amazon, that's going on.
Nowhere. Trump's not going to resign or anything else. That's just not in his nature. It's not in his DNA.
And the Capitol, while we were talking, there's a couple things. Let me just get out. Capitol Hill Police Chief Stephen Sun did just go on camera and absolutely say that he told them, he flatly told he told the House and the Senate security officials that they were requesting permission to call in the National Guard, and that there was intel that there were going to be, groups, infiltration groups, and they denied and and basically dismissed his concerns about infiltration. So it looks like Mo Brooks was telling
the sergeant at arms for that, but I'd be like, if those prosecutors go too far afield with prosecution, they could have a Chicago 7 trial on their hands, because I'm very curious. What did McConnell know? What did Pelosi know?
Yeah.
Because, it seems like they welcomed it effectively by not being proactive, not being protective, and then spreading exaggerated fears. Like, somebody was spreading stories that there was that the protesters were shooting, that none of that was true, that they had Molotov cocktails. I've seen no evidence of that whatsoever.
Unless somebody shows me
danger than they were.
Unless somebody shows me photographic evidence, Robert, I had too many people at that protest give me firsthand accounts of what happened, including the shooting of that girl. And it doesn't jive with anything. You know, the bottom line is Trump groups, Trump crowds have no history of violence at all. Any kind of violent insinuations of violence made by Jim Acosta. One time I was there. I was literally standing next to Jim, and he fabricated the danger he was in Tampa. We were right there. Laura and I were right there. I was standing 2 feet away from Jim. He lied. He flatly lied about the crowd coming after him like that. So that's total nonsense. Today in DC, and I've been told this by multiple people. You brought up Paul before. I've been told this, that Paul is absolutely right, that they are doing nothing. They are consumed today with figuring out a way. And I'm talking about they, meaning the leadership of both parties. They have been consumed by how to make it conclusive that Donald Trump cannot run again in 2024. And they tried to get the 25th Amendment invoked. The Republicans blocked that. See, like you were saying, there are Republicans in the House that have a spine. The House of passion, right? The lower chamber with more passion has been acting more accordingly than the Senate. They're supposed to be deliberate. They're just a bunch of cowards. And what you said before, and just to add on that, you know, they've really become just like every other country, right? Where we're not what makes us exceptional anymore. We're just not. And they used to view it, what made us exceptional made the rest of the world view us as rather barbaric. And now we don't have that. We're more like them, and we're just not exceptional anymore, where they wouldn't care. It's just the way it is. They are talking about they can't get the 25th through. And Robert, if they really did, if Mitch McConnell and the rest of these frauds really did try to tailor some plan, they'd be finished. They could be headed for like a 2022 defeat of epic proportions, which is supposed to be a good year for the out of power party. They could make history yet again for epic failures. You know, what's amazing, there's two problems. One is an inherent weakness always with representative government. That's why I favor more as many direct democratic or as localized a power as possible of government. That's how we were originally created. Even the Senate was meant to be a deliberative body, but the deliberators had a democratic check on them because the state legislatures could recall them. The inability for state legislatures to have any control over who goes to the Senate has effectively made them an elite body without democratic ties or restrictions of any meaningful consequence. I mean, these senators that get 6-year terms who know from the day they get elected they're not going to run for re-election, their focus is on what's going to make the Washington crowd happy, not what's going to make their constituents happy. And it raises a bigger question. What happens to a representative government when the representatives are not representative of their constituency? That's major problem, Robert, in all of this is that we don't have, and going back to what I was just saying, we always had a group of men, women, whatever it may be, rise to the occasion. We always had people who were big enough for the moment, and we just don't have that now. We're like every other nation whose leaders failed the people that they were supposed to be representing and serving. They failed them. The difference between America and everybody else was that we made big people here, and we don't anymore. I think it's really important we don't gaslight ourselves, into thinking, well, no, guys, we don't. Otherwise, we would have seen it in the last, not just 4 months, in the last 4 years. Everybody caved to Russia collusion. Everybody caved to what they react instead of being proactive. They're reactive. They're small, and they're, the right. They're afraid of the media. I mean, it's just one coward story after another.
We professionalize the political class.
Yes.
And that group only cares about other members of the professional class. Yeah. And it's completely disconnected from the working class on both parties. And that's what I mean. Trump first faced coup stage 1 was Spygate. Coup stage 2 was Mueller. Coup stage 3 was Ukraine Gate. And now coup stage 4 is just a literal military coup attempt. And otherwise, it's the constitutional abuse of the 25th Amendment, which has no application here whatsoever.
At all.
And it's the constitutional abuse of impeachment. And these are the same people just several days ago were saying it was only they had to defend the Constitution is why they couldn't allow an election contest to occur in Congress.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
do you not realize people don't believe them anymore?
Yeah.
That they can see through these hypocrisies and duplicities that are back to back within days right away. I mean, it's like it reminds me of the Cuban state when I was down there. I was like, their suppression of press backfires because the people, Cuban people, don't believe anything their government tells them, and they believe every crazy thing they hear that's anti-government. Like they really thought if they came to America, they were going to be living like Al Pacino. It was all going to be gold and grand glamour. And I was like, do they not realize that the suppression of independent information leads to the complete distrust and discrediting of everything you say? They don't. They live in their own little world, safe space environment where they don't understand it.
And anyone who has failed to accurately poll an election for years and years and years, if you even count 2012, it's 5 in a row. If you count 2012, because they got Obama right, but they were wrong about why. So you can count that as a failure as well, right? Mm-hmm. If people who haven't polled, Reuters, Quinnipiac, and now even Nate, you're terrible. Just stop. You all can't poll an election. The election is the only test of a pollster's accuracy. And you have the temerity to try to presume that you can gauge the opinions of the public on something as important as whether or not a president should be removed from office. You have the nerve to even throw your hat in the ring with that. Anybody at this point who would listen to a Reuters Ipsos poll, the only reason why you would contract Ipsos again is because you like that they lie to people for you. There's no other explanation. You can't be that bad. You cannot be that bad.
It's completely fake polls, fake news, fake information meant to shape the opinion of basically the people in the House and the Senate. That's who they're targeting right now.
They're talking to the senators and the lawmakers.
And that's why having as part of this project, if enough people subscribe to you on locals, they could provide enough support for like a monthly poll that has accurate information that we make sure gets directly
in their hands,
elected officials, to the House members, to the senators, to when it's relevant to a particular state, to the state House members, state senators. It's amazing what information they don't have. I was shocked at the amount of key information that several House members didn't have about the election contest. Yeah, they didn't. Like a lot of them didn't even know about the signature match issue.
I know,
and they didn't know about it until they were being prepped the night before.
I know it, man.
And I was like, we got to have a constant conduit in to that world to be a separate source of information, not only for our audience and the broader public, but also for these key decision makers so that they get independent, accurate information. The role that Rush Limbaugh played for the right over the past 30 years.
Yeah.
Re-narrating the story, and he had enough institutional followers that they were able to counteract the influence of the institutional press. But, I'll be honest, Limbaugh's not likely going to be around much longer. That's clear from his declining health. Yeah. So it's even more important than ever. And then you see those conservative-controlled radio stations. Now there's conflicts about what they said and didn't say, but purportedly we're telling all the conservative radio guests that they are say anything bad about the election.
Robert, we got emails like that from big tech, so it doesn't surprise me at all that what's it called? It starts with a C, I believe. Would tell Levin and Dan Bongino and everybody that you'll be removed from air if you keep this up, because I'm telling you, I guess I already did it, but I've been told if one more video here, one more this. I even got accused. I kid you not. I even got accused. These people of they said that. When I went into Georgia and I showed the number of change of address flags in Fulton County, this is how stupid they are, Robert. They accused me of fabricating what happens on this platform, folks. I go in a feature called Screen Share and I show you another tab. That's on my browser. That's it, right? That's what it is. And then I open up the voter files and show you those voter files. They flatly accused me of fabricating a screenshot. I said, dummies, it's not a screenshot. It's a screen share. It was live. Go back and look at it again. You can't Photoshop a live, it's a query. I'm setting the parameters of the query for the database and we're returning live results. I'm like, and of course they dropped it because once they realized it was something that I did actually live, they heard about it and they thought it was just a screenshot that I must have put on as an image on the show, which I also shared on Twitter. They ran to their good buddies at PolitiFact who told them it was incorrect, that it must have been fake. They must have felt so stupid. But this is the kind of information warfare we're going to deal with in these, coming years. And I just put that up because of what you said before, Robert. This is the evolution of a citizen legislature to political correctness. It is the most conclusive evidence that the progressive era was a fraud, and it had nothing to do with one man, one vote. The plot bands here, or the lines, this is Munn v. Illinois, all right, which was a court case over Congress's ability to regulate and set grain storage prices. I believe it was grain or something like that. But the bottom line is their ability to tell companies about it, to regulate commerce. And then this is the Wilson-Gorman Tariff Act. And then after that, years later, we had Pollock v. Farmers Loan and Trust. They all have in common two things because they precede the 16th and 17th Amendments, which was a log rolling deal. They didn't pass one at a time. A log rolling deal is basically the most corrupt thing ever. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. I mean, it's really dirty quid pro quo stuff. But some people wanted the ability to directly tax individuals. Before that amendment, guys, it was illegal for the federal government to tax you. All right.
Well, or another way to put it is that you had to apportion it amongst the states. That's very important.
Yeah, very important difference.
So what does this chart show? Like what does the spike reflect?
What it basically shows is the average tenure in the House and the Senate. And the reason why it's so convincing is because you can clearly see the House follow the Senate, right? So in big jumps in tenure. So we had the state legislatures that would pick the senators, and that would go to DC. If there was a problem, they would recall it. The progressive movement argued that people should pick senators and that it was corrupt, that the legislatures were wheeling and dealing. And in truth, there were few examples of that. There was a guy who wrote this argument for these amendments called the treason of the Senate, and it was complete propaganda. All right. And then in any other case that there was the argument that it's possible that somebody wouldn't be able to, the Oregon situation, which was totally bull. I mean, it happened once, it was remedied, no problem. What it shows is that when Congress was given the power to tax, and then with the tax and regulate, and then with the choice of having, not choice, it was the law of having directly be elected by people, you can see average tenure explode. And what this meant was special interests, or they called them rent seekers, and I still call them that, they were getting annoyed with having to buy another senator that would come in because the state legislature would pull away their guy and bring him back and send a new guy. And it gets very expensive to have to bribe a new senator every 6 to 8 years, right? So they wanted people to elect them to make it easier. Like they'll support their campaign, they'll fund their campaigns because it costs a lot of money to run, and they'd be able to keep their guys there. When that was the 16th and 17th were passed, the average, Robert, in the U.S. Senate was 4.8 years, less than a full term. And then it skyrocketed, and this chart goes to 12.8 in 2009. I got to add to it because the Congressional Review, the CRA, they are the ones who do this data, and they don't do it every year. So it probably is out now, and I got to add to this chart. But my hunch is that we'd see these lines both go up. But you could see the U.S. Senate, and then once that happened in the Senate, the House followed shortly thereafter. So that made it profitable. It made it worth something to become a career politician. And it wasn't like that before. You had another job. You went home, you served a little bit, then you went back to your law practice, or you went back to your restaurant, or whatever the hell it is that you did. You were a farmer. Not anymore. And that is because of the progressive movement and their two very much heralded amendments that turn this into a democracy, a dirty democracy instead of a republic. That's really what did it.
I mean, really what it is, a consolidated power.
Absolutely. We got another chart for wealth.
It really wasn't removing the people's ability to influence or control the senator. It wasn't increasing their direct control. It was decreasing it.
That's exactly right.
more direct control with state legislators who were very local to them. Goes back to the original principle of the Constitution, which is about localized power.
That's right. The closer,
most responsive power.
that's
It's a combination,
exactly right.
like the Republic component was skin in the game, want people with property and connected to the community over an extended time period with some knowledge and understanding about how policy can impact and influence their community. But it was all about it being localized so that it could stay. The whole idea was the Senate would have this deliberative component for 6-year terms would facilitate that.
Yep.
But the Democratic component would be state legislature control, just like the electors.
Yes.
Same principle behind the presidential electoral college was that state legislatures were the most responsive body. If you look at the federal government, what body would be the closest to the people? It would be the state legislatures. They're going to be closer by far because they're elected on shorter terms and they are more representative of their local population due to the constituency size.
They live close to you too. I mean, really live.
Oh,
they don't have
people
a
you
flat.
can actually get a hold of, and you don't have to get lucky with Lindsey Graham at the airport. There are people you can run into in your local grocery store at the diner.
Keith Perry, my old state senator, and he was a state rep first. Keith Perry, he owned the roofing company in Gainesville. I mean, everybody knew Keith. I mean, so you knew him. You could see him, Robert, at the Gator game. I mean, he was right there. I mean, that's all the time. Homecoming, they were big on that. And in fact, liberals, you want to talk about double standards? Liberals chased him and his wife one day, were threatening to do terrible things to his wife and almost physically beat him up when he defended himself. The Gainesville Sun, which is owned by the same company as the New York Times, then accused him of assaulting somebody. I mean, it was outrageous what they did. Because yes, you may be already suspicious that Keith is a Republican. So, of course, they were trying to take him out. But we have another chart that went along with this, and I did that for our Virtuous Republic at first, and then we've been updating it over all these years. But we have another geographical chart to show you where wealth was distributed around the United States before the Progressive Era in the 16th and 17th Amendment. And it was the Rockefellers and the Carnegies. It was all over the Rust Belt, the Mid-Atlantic, out west. It was everywhere. It really showed you that if you were willing and had the work ethic to live the American dream, that you could go out and get it, man. You could.
Oh, yeah. All that started with this book, Chance Democratic, about the working man's parties in New York City. But it started with Jacksonian America. Yeah. You had the ultimate expansion of economic sharing. It was the most democratized sharing of wealth and resources and power in world history to that date. And so it's extraordinary. And that's where finding ways to utilize local powers. And that's where people forget elections are really local. Even federal elections are being conducted locally. Yes. That's why there's a lot more means to reform elections than people think.
And you think, guys,
your state legislature even. You might just need to get on the election commission. You might just need to know how the election commissioner is picked. Do you know how many election commissioners never hear from anybody?
Yeah.
Well, and the few times they hear, they're institutional establishment types. What if they knew there were real watchdogs involved in monitoring how they did everything? Whether they purged rolls of dirty rolls or not, whether they cleaned up dirty rolls or not, which machines they chose to use or not use, how they were doing canvassing and recanvassing, how they were doing, because there are rules on the books to require them to do things in an open, transparent, democratic manner that is not being enforced because nobody's paying attention until it's after the fact. Yeah. And those are some of the rights we're going to be, as part of the Election Integrity Project, will be informing you of your rights. And then Richard and I will be working on a book too that will be about combining the historical aspect with the data aspect.
Yeah, we got
it. We have a populist. It would probably just be called the populist majority.
It's going to be
the goal will be to give people information and intel so they understand which policies are actually popular in this country. Like the reality is on election law reform, as Richard's documented, almost every single proposal is overwhelmingly popular, and all of them have majority support. Some just have 75, 80% support.
Yeah, ridiculous.
So and convincing, because this will be important in lobbying legislatures. This will be important in referendums or initiatives. This will be important in talking to congressmen and senators to point out to get accurate information, because all of this big data, big tech purge, all of this targeting of Trump, social shaming campaign of Trump supporters, all this criminalization of disagreement is intended to deprive people of honest information. Going along with so that they today can put out Larry Sabato can put out nonsense about Quinnipiac says everyone hates Donald Trump. And last week they could say that, the fake position of president-elect, that Joe Biden has huge approval. Everybody loves this guy. It's just amazing. And more of that nonsense is coming. So there needs to be information counteracting it. And part of that will be a book that can sort of be a guidepost for sort of a Kevin Phillips emerging Republican majority updated. Majority incorporating the data and information and the precinct information to show what really happened in 2020, what really happened in 2016, who the decisive constituencies and communities are. And the point is to remind both parties that the country wants clean elections. The country wants a little d democratic economic reforms that empower them, not just bail out Wall Street, bail out big banks, and bail out big industry. They would much rather have a job than a stimulus check. But if the choice is a stimulus check for them or a stimulus check to the stimulus, in quotes, to the banks, it should go to them. And then in cultural policies, this is a culturally conservative country. Yeah. And like people say, oh, what happens with amnesty? Well, in new states, well, just remember this. If somehow that passes, look at the huge numbers Trump improved amongst Mexican-American voters, Puerto Rican voters, and immigrant voters across the country. If all you did was look at voters who were recent immigrants, Trump, that was his number one trending group in his favor in 2020. And the same thing with going back to states.
Oh, the new arrivals is why he crushed Florida. The new arrivals why he crushed Florida.
This is a culturally conservative, economically populist group. And if you study the history of immigrant groups in the United States, once the second generation rolls around, the concerns about they become less immigration sensitive and all about economic populism and cultural conservatism.
Political maturation. Yep.
Exactly, across the board. I mean, look at what, the Italians of the 20s that were voting in the Democrats became the Italians of the 70s voting in Nixon and Reagan in 80. So this is the likely transformation. We've already glimpsed it in these last election results, but it's to show people here's the road. The same reason Kevin Phillips wrote it in 1966 for the Nixon campaign. His point was populism is the future. So if you want to be successful in the electoral politics, become more of a populist. And that will be part, in reminding people of our history, showing them the contemporary data that substantiates that, to try to motivate as many people as possible and to give people a script of historical context and understanding to filter policy proposals that conform to it.
And guys, let me just repeat this again because I see a bunch of super chats.
Constitutional issues that trying to make D.C. a state. In Puerto Rico, there's problems because people in Puerto Rico don't want a state.
They don't want to be a state, Robert.
Tax loophole problems, tax loophole advantages vanish. Number one, ask Puerto Ricans who are shocked when they go to Florida and they're like, income tax? Well, what's tax? They're like, oh no, yeah. So that's part one. Part two is I'll just remind all the Democrats of what happened in the 1950s. In the 1950s, they cut a deal. There were Republicans would let Alaska come in because everybody knew Alaska was going to be a loyal Democratic state. And in exchange, Democrats would let Hawaii come in because everybody knew Hawaii would be a loyal Republican.
How things flipped.
Yeah, look at how that turned out. So I mean, I'm of course opposed stacking the Senate in this indirect way by expanding statehoods. But there are things that can go in different direction, especially if election reform and populist candidates and populist understanding begins to expand and deepen. And the best way to do that is using populist methods. So, the Granger movements, the other movements of the late 1880s, 1890s, 1900s that helped take on the railroads and win. You talk about a group that looked insurmountable, unbeatable. It was the railroads of the 1880s. I mean, there's a reason why everybody loved Jesse James. Yeah, because they hated the railroad so much.
The railroad. Yeah, that's so true. I mean,
we can take on the big tech guys are nowhere near as bad as. I mean, look at Jack Dorsey. Does he look like a tough robber baron to you? He's a wannabe robber baron.
Yeah, right. He's a wannabe, Robert. That's exactly right. These guys are wannabes of that era. Wannabes, and like you were saying before. What was his name? Kill Jesse James. Robert.
The traitor.
What was it?
You mean who was the traitor? The guy that shot him in the back?
Yeah, the one who shot him in the back. Yeah,
I forget it. I forget. I'm blanking. I can see the image. But
Robert
don't
Ford.
remember
Thank you, Robert Ford. Somebody said it before. Yep, it was. I mean, this guy lived out his miserable existence after that. I mean, that's that. There is, and they controlled him. The railroads. They controlled the press out there. They had everything.
They bought politicians. Back then, you could just give your state senator, or your congressman, you give them shares in the railroad.
That's right.
Just like these two losers who lost in Georgia. I mean, that's part of the reason why they lost is because they wanted to continue to trade in stocks on inside information from the Senate. Yep. That's one of the things we can push for reform on. Reform in terms of senators shouldn't be allowed to libel. That's going to be part of the Elizabeth Warren Covington case that I'm still a part of. That if we don't get remedy at the Supreme Court, legislative remedy.
These exemptions have to go, Robert. These exemptions have to go.
They can't be trading on inside information. Just can't happen. The reality is they shouldn't really own stock and be in the Senate.
The idea that it's a blind trust. As someone who used to, years ago, I was a financial advisor to people years ago. This idea that it's in a blind trust is kind of nonsense, guys. I mean, really, you're
blind. You can sort of peek and do peekaboo,
peekaboo. Nothing really blind about it. And then you tell somebody else who in turn tells them. I mean, it's really, if
you want to be in the United States Senate, you shouldn't be there to get rich.
Yeah.
That's simple.
Totally agree.
So look at how rich Mitch McConnell's got. Look at how rich Nancy Pelosi's got.
Mitch McConnell's it's criminal. With great work.
Forfeit your seat if you.
Great work by Peter.
Dramatically skyrockets while you're in office.
Great work by Peter Schweitzer on McConnell. I mean, my God, I didn't even realize that till I read Schweitzer, and wow. I mean, he's one of the worst offenders, and that's why people who wonder and all the time ask me, I can't understand how they go after Trump on these things, but they make, it's mum's the word on Biden. And what people really need to understand is because this is perfectly normal corruption in Washington, D.C. They all do it. Mitch McConnell cannot be critical of Joe Biden. He does the same damn thing. I mean, that's it. It's sad, but it's true. I mean, this is why there had appeared to be a double standard. In truth, they were applying the standard to each other across the board because they all do it. And that's really it.
Another irony, like some of the best lawsuits against big tech that Trump and other people could bring is probably in foreign countries. Another irony is like maybe the freest internet will be like Telegram or other ones that have connections to like Russia.
So the names of foreign leaders.
Because RT is totally independent. RT might be one of the last places you can get independent news about America. Isn't that crazy?
I'll tell you what. RT was the only one who called me when that whistleblower went to James at Project Veritas. And by the way, the stuff they talk about him too. I finally got a chance to really talk to James a couple weeks ago. And I mean, it's amazing how they say everything they say about people is just total nonsense. It's really, it's just, it never ceases to amaze me. Yeah.
360 plus, whatever it is, retractions and corrections. I mean, he's got a record by far. And he has a great story. He talks about how when he was arrested in Louisiana, and he couldn't fly, couldn't do anything. He was sort of down and felt down and out. And it was his sister that, reminded him of the power of the individual and of collective individuals taking action. And in time that could happen. And of course, then he built up Project Veritas from that. So there are ways to maintain independent what the system is forcing people to do is to get a lot more sophisticated.
Take a lot in their own hands and do it smarter.
How they organize their lives.
Yeah.
And this will be, I'll be talking to George Gammon at the end of the week on Friday, debating Dershowitz tomorrow night.
Oh, I can't miss that.
Vaccines and mask mandates.
Are you really doing that? So I told somebody.
Viva Fry's channel. We'll be debating him on the constitutionality of mask mandates and
because
vaccines. Is there a constitutional right to informed consent before the government invades your body?
I forgot to tell you this, and I'm going to tell you on air, but somebody had come to me and asked me about that. They wanted to put on a debate thing. These guys are pretty impressive. I'll tell you more after the show, but they were like, well, do you want to debate Dershowitz on vaccines, basically? And I was like, I'm not a lawyer. You got to go to Robert Barnes. So I told him to go to you. So if you get that call, that's going to be like a redo of tomorrow night, I guess, because I can't miss that. I'll be watching that, guys. You better be watching it too. But what I was saying was, they do make the individual now change to basically take more into their own hands and to be smarter about it. If it wasn't for James, I would never, and the whistleblower went to James, I would never have known that People's Pundit Daily was in fact on a blacklist, of basically a fake blacklist from Google, because we were in their Google News index, but they were blacklisting us from showing up in Google News. Now, if it was for any good reason other than censorship and ideology, they would have de-indexed us. They would have delisted us from Google News, but they know we've never reported anything fake or incorrect, so they couldn't. And all they were mad at us for doing was having a better election projection model than Nate the Slimer, right? So they did that to us, and we would have never have known. The only media outlet who called me to ask my opinion when that became public was RT. That's it. Nobody else, no other American outlet gave a damn that they did that to a domestic news organization.
Well, that's where, finding more and more independent sources. RT actually has a lot of good, interesting, independent information. There's a show that I like on YouTube called The Gaggle with Peter Lavelle and George Samueli. You can just look up The Gaggle on YouTube and find it. They have sort of daily commentary, independent insight, sort of anti-empire, more populist perspectives, but very informed. Both of them are extraordinarily well-educated individuals, and they have some other people on that are also of the same type. And then when I'm on Friday with George Gammon, part of what I'm going to be talking about is the economic means of independence people need to set up in terms of, and that partially is resource contingent. Some people can afford different levels of protection, but people should have at least whatever means and method of protection they can have. So they're not dependent. The lockdowns have reinforced this. And then you took the big tech purges on top of it. And now the targeting of political dissidents on top of that. And people need to have every method and mechanism of protection they possibly can to have backup plans in place now, not wait like Parler did when it was too late.
Yeah, let's bring that up, because people were saying how AWS is On Locals is not owned by AWS, guys. They're not owned by Amazon. They have their stuff on it, but they do have
and they have other backups already there. Contingencies already there. They're ultimately going to incorporate blockchain technology and other techniques to be completely independent. They're ahead of the curve, so they're very safe. Dave, they're as safe as you practically can be. There's always risk they just completely shut down the internet someday. And that's why the other I'm going to be talking about, have real backups for old school communication. Ham radios, you name it. Have those available to you if you can, just to be prepared. Better to need something, better to have something and not need it than need it and not have it.
Yeah, those who know me know I'm a bit of a prepper. Because look, I'm a student.
These days, the way I'm telling is they're going to treat us all like Alex Jones, so we might as well prepare like we're Alex Jones.
Robert, I built when we built this house, man. I put in all this stuff. I even have the generator transfer switch. I put all that in. I mean, because you need all. Yeah, I mean, I know it sounds nuts, but the water purification stuff is on its way. I mean,
and you gotta have it. I mean, it's just the modern, to the degree, different people can afford different things. But if you have a plot of land that's off the grid that has certain protection, you can go if you need to. You just have to be prepared. I mean, all those people that showed up in D.C., do you think those people who didn't participate in anything illegal, didn't see anything illegal, did their most patriotic thing, think they would come home to being their job gone, being defamed, their life being destroyed overnight? And it's like, I mean, Enemy of the People. Was that the movie? No, Enemy of the State. Was that the movie with Gene Hackman and
Enemy of the State?
Right. I mean, that was previewing all of it, right? Gene Hackman's character is off the grid. He's learning all these things in advance. There's reasons to be prepared. And especially these days, but between the lockdowns where you don't know what you're going to be permitted to do tomorrow, and now with complete democratic national control and where they're going, it's really irresponsible not to be ready.
Yeah, you would be, if you have kids, you would be doing a disservice to them not to do this, because that's what weighs on me very heavily, Robert. I got 3 children now. One's pretty young. We spaced out that third one, obviously, but which is kind of funny because the two are rivalry, very sibling rivalry is involved there. But with the younger one, they actually have a rivalry over who can be a better older sibling. So it's a good thing, but that weighs on me heavily because it is difficult to explain some of this stuff to them. And in fact, it's your job as a parent to make sure that they have that you are prepared for the inevitable, which I do believe is the inevitable at some point. It always is. And also to, how we talk to our kids during this situation. Look, Robert was just talking about election officials too. A big problem was, and some of you saw my tweets or my parlay before they shut them down. This will be an excellent illustration of what Robert and I are talking about. I live in an R32 district. It is military and veteran and affluent whites who are Republican. Okay. And it's amazing because that it also blows a hole in the media story about what exactly is a suburb shift and what isn't. And I have argued that the suburbs that are shifting are suburbs that don't look the way they looked years ago. And mine is a perfect example. It's very affluent, right? But in any event, the superintendent here is a liberal, and so is her assistant. And they blasted out after what happened in the Capitol that all summer long, not a peep about killing cops, David Dorn being murdered while his poor wife and, had to, and family members had to watch it live stream on Facebook, the burning wholesale of major U.S. cities, the assaults on federal buildings, the destruction of federal monuments, on and on and on and on. Not a peep out of these two libs. And then they thought it was their job or that it was appropriate for them to come out and give what, is a very typical liberal speech about what happened. This was an assault on our freedoms. Let me tell you, she's on her last leg right now. And in fact, my old county, Robert, just tossed the superintendent. Christine, I know you live where we used to live. That you guys just junked your superintendent. There is also levels where even if, and that's a blue area, but this is not, this is a red area. And yet for some reason, everyone who counts votes is blue. Everyone who teaches our children, they're blue. So that is on us for allowing that.
And it's something that can be reformed and corrected.
Doesn't have to be
and that's where, and people should look at the degree to which they can either counterbalance or change or do something different than their conventional public education, in terms of what their kids are learning and how they're learning it and what's happening.
Which we are now, as a matter of fact.
It's part of the everyday behavior. It was like it's amazing how the religious right was ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
Because religious conservatives in the late 70s realized what was happening in public education, realized what was happening in the cultural institutions, that it was an attack on their way of life. So they self-segregated and self-separated and formed their own school institutions, formed their own cultural institutions to counterbalance that. And that's why there's been a war against the church ever since, in large part, in different parts of the left world. It was right during Jimmy Carter's tenure, where they tried to get them all labeled racist by misappropriating the history of what took place.
Absolutely.
It probably helped kill Carter's reelection, at least in the South. All the independent methods of how to become more self-empowered, how to seize power back to yourself, how to use that power and leverage against local officials and other officials to change the way the world works for yourself and for others, is part of what we'll be part of in the new year. So it's the biggest constitutional crisis since 1860 that I think we're heading into.
Me too.
And it is Empire Strikes Back, but the Empire Strikes Back was the end of the second act. It was not the third act. Third act is the return of the hero. And I think there's ways for millions and millions of Americans to be heroes by restoring our constitutional republic in the way it was intended.
And I'm proud of what they did here, Robert. I mean, this woman is now, she's looking for a desk to crawl under. She's in deep trouble for what she did. The first video that went out, because now this morning we got a new one, backpedaling, but it made people more angry than the first one, because the first one was just outrageous, hypocritical, and partisan. And there were, by the time they shut down comments and the ability to like or dislike it, there were multiple times more people who disliked it and were negative. The comments were overwhelmingly negative. And then this one that came out this morning was even worse, and it made it worse, because what she said was, we got a lot of feedback. We understand parents are unhappy. and that they believe this was a political video. We understand why you took it that way, but it wasn't. But anyway, it was like that very liberal half-ass apology, right? And people are just flipping out even more. And even I, who didn't say something to the first one, right, spoke up today and let them know that, this was worse, because you're teaching our children not only to be inappropriate and to crush dissent and not respect the views of others and to be hypocrites. Not only did you do that in the first one, but now you're telling them that it's okay to be a coward with no character, to admit when you're wrong. So this is just, she's probably done. I mean, people are angry, and this is a way to do it. I mean, for too long, people have just gone on and lived their lives and not realized that they're up against ideologues who are rabid ideologues. They don't just go on, they live for it. And most, I think, conservatives, most working men and women, populists, they just want to go on with their life and live their life, right? So it's like that gives the left an advantage because they're more ideological is not the word. It's another word I'm looking. Fanatical. The word is fanatical. That is the word. Sorry, but it's true. They're fanatics in their belief because, the rest of us fill our hearts and our days and our lives with everything else that surrounds us, our faith, our community, or whatever, our livelihoods, or whatever it is. And we fill our time and our lives with that. They have those holes where we put those other things, and they fill it with their ideology, and it makes them rabid, man. I mean, that's really it. And so they have no shame. Like, think about if a Republican in New York City would want to be the superintendent of schools. Like, that's the equivalent of what they do everywhere. And they have no shame in doing it. And they are successful because you're not paying attention. You're just not paying attention. You're not active.
It's the old popular front methodology of the communist, which was to infiltrate institutions that influence the mind.
Yeah.
And they've done it in advertising. They've done it in corporate branding and marketing and human resource departments and major businesses. Yeah. I mean, that's why these companies don't think twice about immediately condemning Republicans that had nothing to do with what took place at the Capitol, while they actually celebrated the same violent techniques, much worse, by BLM over the whole summer. I mean, wrote them billion-dollar checks. It's because the people who run their marketing and branding and human resources departments are of the same ideology of the people who run our cultural institutions, our academy, the entertainment industry, and the news industry.
And we talked about this on What Are the Odds a while ago when the BLM stuff was going on. And I told you at the time, a vendor had sent me an email supporting Black Lives Matter, and I dumped them as a vendor because I told them, and I wrote them back, we're supposed to be data professionals. And I know that there is no genocide of Black young men in the United States, that all of these talking points are bogus, at least most of them anyway, although you and I both know that there are different treatments for different people in some areas of this country.
There's plenty of racial discrimination that exists. There's plenty of gender discrimination that exists. There's plenty of age discrimination that exists.
We're just not.
These days, the most pernicious form of discrimination is political discrimination. Yep. And that will be other areas like where we can do referendums or initiatives and legal ideas and strategies. And part of that will be polling to show support for it. So I think that, I think it would be great to poll sometime over the next several weeks, not only about Trump and impeachment, all this other stuff to rebut this narrative, but about some of these tactics Democrats are taking. Do you support someone losing their job because of their political beliefs?
Oh, wow.
Support someone not being able to get a book deal because of their political beliefs?
You know what, guys?
Being removed from social media because of their political beliefs. You're going to see that almost nobody does.
In the Venmo and PayPal things are below for the polls. If you want to do that, do that. Do not give, and I appreciate, again, the super chats. Maybe some of them weren't here in the beginning of the show, but I was saying, Google, Alphabet, owns YouTube, and they take 30% of those super chats that you guys give us. So if you want to support us, don't do it through there. Do it another way, and then save your money for when Locals is up and running. You can go right now on Locals. We're going to put up free content, but then I'm going to do a couple of a short video a day, Robert, basically just venting, because I'm at a point now where, me, I like to try to stick to the data and to keep to empirical evidence. I don't like commentary, but at some point you have to speak up. When you get to like a time in history like this, I'm the only one playing by the old rules, Robert. I'm the only one, I mean, this is, I'm at this point, I'm just being a fool if I don't. And that's what we're going to have for On Locals. So that'll be the value you get out of that. But I mean, we're don't give to these people is my point. Like, so I know you're trying to do it to support me, but you're supporting them in the process. Really, like Robert was saying with polling, we could do whether or not people want Trump removed. We could do, there's a slew of polling, whether or not people should lose. Actually, we could ask whether or not they believe it was fair that Trump was banned off of Twitter. Not even fair, but do you agree with it? Yeah, right?
Exactly. And generally, do you support social media places like Twitter, et cetera, removing elected officials' ability to communicate with with the citizenry?
Right.
Do you support removing people's social media access based on their political beliefs?
Yeah.
Do you support people not getting employment opportunities based on their political beliefs?
Yeah.
Do you think there should be a law that prohibits discrimination in employment based on one's political beliefs?
That's a matrix question if I ever saw it. For guys or people who don't know, Robert and I are talking matrix question is when you say, please tell us whether you agree or disagree with the following, and you just have a grid and it gives them all these different, it's what we did with the election reform.
Exactly.
Integrity deadlines, photo identification, signature verification, counting ballots in the middle of the night, on and so forth. Those were matrix grids. And that's one, if I ever saw one, Robert, do you support this or agree or disagree with the following, and just run down the list of all the things they are doing, not intend to do, they are doing. Do you think it should be legal for big tech to be able to, stamp out competition? Of course, we'd have to get more creative with that. But with what happened,
well, it would be something like, do you think an email service provider should be allowed to deny and terminate access based on the political beliefs of the people that of the company?
And the way these other
customers of the
ask these questions, they're ridiculous because it's arbitrary as hell. They would never say if it was BLM was the topic and it was just a riot and the burning of a city, they would never say, do you think that MailChimp has a right to get rid of BLM's, subscription list or to deny BLM because they had violence? They would never say it like that with BLM. They would say,
of course not. Of course not. I mean, on the same day that Twitter removed the president's ability to communicate directly to his own citizenry, they on the grounds that him saying, please have a peaceful and patriotic protest was somehow imminent incitement of criminal actions, they allowed to be their top trending item, hang Mike Pence.
Yeah.
And that tells you who these people are.
I mean, all right, it is 4:06. I guess with that, Robert, I guess we could bang out of here today for this one, right? But yeah, when you say that again when you're debating Dershowitz and then have Gammon on at the end of the week.
So Tuesday at 7:00 on 7:00 Eastern time on Viva Fry's YouTube channel, we'll be debating Alan Dershowitz on the constitutionality of forced vaccines and mask mandates. Then on Friday at I'm not sure when he's going to post it, but Friday afternoon at some point after that, going to be on George Gammon's channel. He has a lot of good, insightful information in general about how to set yourself up independently, economically. So you're not in a situation where if the bank shuts you down tomorrow, you're shut down.
Yeah.
And things like that. The utility of Bitcoin, which of course, if you bought Bitcoin like he's recommended over the last year, you're sitting pretty nice right now. But there's also other advantages to it. It's utility. It's independence of the system from being able to seize or take it from you summarily. And similar things like that. So those will be and then otherwise go to the locals boards. Go to Richard's People's Pundit. Is it peoplespundit.locals.com?
It is. Yep.
Right.
Peoplespundit.locals.com.
And also People's Pundit. Is it ppdnews.com?
If they go to ppdnews.us, that'll redirect them to peoplespunditdaily.com. Yeah, that's the short link.
peoplespunditdaily.com/subscribe.
Yep.
So that in case Richard disappears from the gets memory hold anytime soon from the social media sphere. And then for me, you can go to vivabarneslaw.locals.com. We'll be providing content there all week as well. But the goal is to have it independent in case they try to disappear me as well anytime soon.
And just to give a shout out, because he's constantly retweeting us when we do What Are the Odds? And I've seen you on his show before. I've been on it myself. Eric Hunley has a show. If you guys are thinkers,
Yeah, it's called Unstructured.
Unstructured is a fantastic show. I started watching it because I saw when you were on. I did it, and then I saw you were on it too, and I was like, "Oh, let me check this out." And you were on.
He has great guests. He has the behavior panel, cult experts, body, mind, signature handwriting experts, tons of fascinating people. I think he's going to have a CIA intel expert on this week.
It's really cool stuff that he has. I mean, it is not your average podcast.
Oh, no,
I mean, really not. It's like
an erudite Joe Rogan.
Right, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, Unstructured. That is the name of it. Great show. I just wanted to give him a shout out because he's doing a fantastic job. All right,
Absolutely.
folks. With that as well, all the links down in the bottom, and then the newsletters. That's a big deal. Like Robert and I were saying, you got to get off their services. That ours is on our own. That is never MailChimp will never take that away, and that is our fail safe for if we're vaporized. All right. So with that. And then tomorrow I'm going to be watching your debate with Dershowitz. Everybody else should watch it too. All right. So we'll see you next Monday, but we'll see you before that on Wednesday on Inside the Numbers. All right. And keep your eye on the locals board because it's going to be new and it's going to be daily. All right. All the best, folks. With that, I'm going to sign off. All the best.
Shine down over dotted lines of white across an open highway. Restless nights, coffee houses, clubs and neon lights. I rock the people my way, working my way, coming back to you. Working my way, coming back. Take me home tonight, not wasting it. Overdrive from town to town and in between.